It was a cold and quiet morning in November 20, in the small picturesque town of Gainesville, Georgia. An extremely expensive lake house was surrounded by police, a house worth millions, but that day something different was going to happen. The IRS, that is the United States Tax Agency's criminal investigators, suddenly raided this mansion. Everything was calm outside, but inside the house, in a cupboard kept in the corner of the bathroom under some blankets, something was hidden that shocked everyone. There was an old Sitach popcorn tin placed there, and inside it was hidden a small computer. It looked completely ordinary, but hidden in this computer were bitcoins worth $376,150. These bitcoins belonged to a boy named Jimmy. He had acquired this bitcoin about 10 years earlier, and the remarkable thing was that the person from whom he had received them had never complained. Instead, that person had thanked Jimmy and as a reward had sent more bitcoin. No case, no questioning. So the question arises, then why was there suddenly a raid after so many years? Actually, Jimmy began to live his life openly afterwards. Spending money, partying, impressing girls. This went on and on. But then one day he made a small mistake. A mistake that drew the government's attention to him. And because of that one mistake, America's government was able to reach his hidden fortune worth millions. This is the story of Jimmy Zhong. A person who could have escaped even after doing everything, but didn't. Jimmy was never cool or popular at school. He was an Asian kid growing up in areas like Cobb County, Georgia, in the 1990s, and that period was not easy for him. As a child, other kids teased him, bullied him because he was fat, looked a little different, and in their view strange. Jimmy himself says that the worst day of his life was when, during a football match, his friends pulled his pants down in front of everyone. That day he broke inside. It was as if he was no longer a person, just something had remained, and at that time his parents were not with him either. Jimmy's parents were first-generation immigrants who had come to America from China. They had started a new life here, but with great struggle. His mother worked night shifts as a nurse in a hospital. Jimmy says she was always tired. She would just sleep, and his father never got any steady job. Sometimes he tried to bring cheap goods to sell and spent most of his time lying alone in the basement. By the time he reached middle school, Jimmy's parents had divorced, and then whatever little remained of family vanished too. This was very heavy for Jim. He needed someone of his own, but he had no friends. Jimmy's childhood, though full of loneliness and solitude, had one place where he found the most peace. That place was the small room on the upper floor of his house. His computer was kept there, and he would sit there and lose himself in that screen for hours upon hours. That old computer was not just a machine for Jimmy. It was his window out of the world, a world completely different from reality, where no one taunted him, no one pulled his pants, no one left him alone. Every day Jimmy would turn on that computer and get lost in it. By middle school he had taught himself many programming languages. Later Jimmy himself said that the computer made him think of a life that might never actually be his. But he did not know then that this same computer, this digital world, would one day make him a millionaire. At school Jimmy was considered quiet and clever. When kids teased him or laughed at him, he would hide himself in a book or a math problem. He thought if he didn't give attention maybe it would stop. And honestly, he really was very smart. In 2008, Jimmy graduated from Central Gwinnett School, and his SAT score was nearly perfect. He received Georgia's Biggest Hope Scholarship. Now he was going to study computer science at the University of Georgia. He thought maybe now his parents would be proud of him, but nothing of that sort happened. They didn't say much. At 18, Jimmy packed his things. He went to live an hour away from home and then never spoke to his parents again. At university, a new life began for him. Later he said the real life had begun only now. One thing about Jimmy that is important to know: he loved alcohol very much, but had little money. Times were tight, but then fortune knocked at the door. It was the beginning of the time after the Christmas break was going on. Jimmy was browsing a programming forum. Then his eye fell on a strange post. It was about a new digital currency. The name was Bitcoin. Jimmy was already good at technology and programming, so he paid immediate attention and started mining Bitcoin himself on his laptop. He began earning hundreds of Bitcoins every day. But at that time they had no value. Their value was so low that someone had sold 5,000 bitcoins for even so, that's less than the price of a crate of beer. Jimmy also thought it was all useless. He stopped mining and forgot about it. But then in 2011 the story took a turn. Bitcoin's price reached 30. Jimmy jumped with joy. He remembered that 2 years ago he had mined hundreds of coins. But now the question was, where had they gone? He searched his old laptop but found nothing. He didn't even remember where he had saved those coins. Once again greed awoke in Jimmy. This time he would not give up. Now he was 21. He created an account on a website called Bitcoin Talk. As soon as Jimmy created his new account on Bitcoin Talk, he chose the username 300SSD for me. This name was inspired by the Mercedes-Benz 300SD, a car he always wanted to buy. He thought such a car could impress girls. But people's attention didn't go only to his name, but also to his first post. In his first post, Jimmy wrote about how Bitcoin could be mixed. Now understand this. Every Bitcoin transaction is public. That is, whatever transaction you do is visible on the blockchain. Anyone can see who sent money to whom. So Bitcoin is not as anonymous as people think. Bitcoin mixing is a technique in which transactions are rotated through many layers, so that no one can discover where the money came from and where it went. Those who have even a little understanding of the blockchain know this is a kind of digital camouflage, and Jimmy understood all this very well. His post then seemed like a normal technical discussion, but later this post became a very big clue. Gradually money began to come to Jimmy. His mining setup was quite advanced for that era, and now he was slowly crossing limits. He got into online gaming. There was a website called Bitcoin Pogi, where he played a lot. He became a big fan of it. But soon that site shut down. Now Jimmy had full programming experience. He was in his 3rd year of computer science. So he thought, why not build my own gaming site? And he did. His own website where people gambled with Bitcoin, and Jimmy took a fee on every transaction. At the same time he restarted mining. From these two methods, Jimmy again accumulated a lot of Bitcoins. And the biggest thing was he even managed to recover some old Bitcoins he had mined in 2009. Although about 5,000 Bitcoins were still lost forever because an old hard drive had crashed and there was no backup of that data. Jimmy says if a data recovery expert could open that drive, he could hit a jackpot worth millions of dollars. At that time Bitcoin's price was only about $5. But now Jimmy had far more money than before. So what did he do with that money? The beginning was parties. Jimmy drank every weekend, blacked out many times, and gradually he picked up another addiction: cocaine. Yes, Jimmy had now entered the world of drugs. Every weekend he would take booger sugar. That is, cocaine, and this addiction lasted about 6 years. Ironically, that same addiction later made him a billionaire, in a way he had never imagined. While Jimmy was living a rock star-like life every weekend, something bigger was happening in a dark alley of the internet. A new network was rapidly growing. Its name was Silk Road, a website where every kind of drug was being sold openly, and the payment was in Bitcoin. Jimmy, who was always active on the internet, didn't take long to find out about Silk Road. Within a few days he started using the site for small personal purchases. Remember, Jimmy had earlier posted about Bitcoin mixing. Now perhaps he really felt the need to hide transactions. But after only a few transactions, Jimmy decided he would withdraw his remaining Bitcoins from the site. It was during this withdrawal process that he made a small mistake that changed everything. He accidentally clicked the withdrawal button twice. Surprisingly, the money did come out both times. Jimmy got a double return of his own Bitcoins. He couldn't believe it. Unknowingly, he had discovered a major bug hidden in Silk Road's system. It was a coding flaw called a race condition attack, meaning when a system cannot process two conflicting commands at the same time, and that can be exploited. Jimmy's fingers were fast and his mind even faster, so he thought, why not test this glitch further? And that's when the real game began. On September 19, 2012, Jimmy was only 22. He created a new account on Silk Road with the username The Torment. That day he deposited 500 Bitcoins, approximately $6,045 at September 2012 prices, and in the same second pressed the withdrawal button 5 times. As a result, he got back 2,000 Bitcoins approximately. That same day he repeated the trick and withdrew another 1,000 bitcoins, approximately 12,049. But this was not an infinite money hack. Bitcoins were coming from somewhere, meaning those coins were being stolen from someone else's wallet. In fact, Silk Road had built a special system called a tumbling system. Its purpose was to hide user identity. When a user deposited Bitcoin, it would mix with other users' money and then be sent to side wallets, so no one could track which money belonged to whom. But curiosity had awakened in Jimmy. Could he take even more? Now Jimmy began doing what Silk Road was trying to prevent. He started building his own blockchain tracker that could trace the money inside Silk Road. In other words, he began using Silk Road's own system against it. Jimmy was no longer just silently hacking. He began openly posting about the whole experience on the Bitcoin Talk forum. At the same time, someone on the forum posted a threatening message, mentioning a large Bitcoin address that contained about 500,000 Bitcoins worth roughly $5,000 at the time. And people began to speculate. Many thought it could be Silk Road's address, but Jimmy had no doubt. He was convinced. He wrote plainly on the forum that he had studied the mixer closely, and it failed completely to hide ties to Silk Road. He also shared a link to a blockchain explorer and said it looked like they were moving roughly 500 bitcoins around each day. Jimmy knew that if he tracked the blockchain carefully, as soon as they put coins into the withdrawal pool, he could wipe out the whole stash. And that is exactly what he did. Jimmy posted this on September 21, and exactly 3 days later, on September 24, he executed over 140 transactions from 9 different accounts and repeated the exploit. This time his jackpot was even bigger. Jimmy withdrew bitcoins worth about $2,000 from Silk Road at that moment. By the math, he had taken roughly 1/12 of Silk Road's total revenue. Because Silk Road had earned only 64,000 bitcoins in its lifetime, a sum worth millions of dollars at period prices. Such a large theft recorded on the blockchain could not remain hidden. A few days later, Silk Road's owner, known online as Dread Pirate Roberts, messaged Jimmy privately, but the message was not threatening. He neither demanded money nor intimidated him. He asked only one thing: how did this exploit happen? Jimmy explained everything in detail, and in response, Pirate sent him more Bitcoin as a thank you. 22-year-old Jimmy, who until then had been drowned in alcohol, gambling and drugs, suddenly became the owner of nearly $1 million. Now one might think he would blow all that money. But no. Jimmy placed about 400 bitcoins in one wallet and 10,000 in another, and then did nothing. He neither sold, panicked, nor flaunted. Maybe no one knew what was going through his head. But this time, surprisingly, he behaved responsibly. Still, how could someone as socially awkward as Jimmy, now with so much money, not show off even a little? So about 2 months after receiving those coins, in November 2012, Jimmy created a new Bitcoin Talk account with the username Load. That account had one purpose: to show off, and perhaps it was that showmanship that caused Jimmy his first major loss. Jimmy posted a signed message on his profile saying Bitcoin millionaire, broker and asset manager. This was not just a claim. He had signed the message from the wallet that held 400 bitcoins, thereby proving those coins were his. After that, Jimmy began showing people he was a big Bitcoin investor. He presented himself in posts as an asset manager, a high-value broker and a market expert. In one post, he claimed a new client had come to him, and now he was managing 200,000 bitcoins. In another, he said he was selling on such a scale that he was crashing the whole market. In a post, he even said he carried cash on a private jet to China to buy Bitcoin cheaply, an over-the-table deal. He then made another strange claim. In a 5-star hotel in China, he had requested Western-style toilets, because last time the squat toilets had messed him up. Now the question arises, why was Jimmy doing all this? Was he really running a Ponzi scheme, or was he just trolling people? Maybe he enjoyed lying to make himself look big and rich. He wanted people to believe he was successful and powerful. But the most important point is Jimmy never told where those bitcoins originally came from. He never publicly admitted the true source of his coins. He neither hid nor clarified. In fact, if Jimmy had been a bit more sensible, he might have stayed absolutely quiet and out of the public eye. Because by the end of 2013, staying quiet had become very important. In October 2013, the FBI shut down Silk Road. Ross Ulbricht was arrested, and the government seized 117,000 bitcoins from him. However, that was only part of the story. Authorities said Ross had earned a total of 640,000 bitcoins through Silk Road. The big question then was where the rest of the coins had gone. Ross claimed most bitcoins were returned to the marketplace, but suspicions remained that many coins had gone to others. And in that raid, the FBI obtained a crucial item: Silk Road's full data. That database contained records of every user's activity, when they deposited, when they withdrew, which wallets they sent to, everything. And in that database was solid evidence of Jimmy's entire hacking scheme. If someone knew where to look, they could easily trace the blockchain and find out into which wallets Jimmy had hidden all his stolen Bitcoin. And if he had attempted to convert any of those coins to USD on an exchange, that exchange under court order would have to reveal Jimmy's true identity to the authority. They could. Now these Bitcoins were no longer just some digital tokens. They had become hot funds. Jimmy now had to take every step very carefully, because if he made even one small mistake, his entire game could be over. In 2014, Jimmy completed his bachelor's degree. At the time of his college graduation, the price of Bitcoin was around $500, and Jimmy's total net worth had reached about $30 million. If he had played his cards a little more wisely, he might never have needed a job in his entire life. Now Jimmy had a lot of time and a lot of money. So, out of boredom, he started returning to those old things he had dreamed of since childhood. The first thing he did was buy the same Mercedes-Benz he had dreamed of since he was a kid. Then he bought a luxurious house in Athens, Georgia. If you ever passed by that house, you would see his Mercedes parked in the driveway and Georgia Bulldogs signs on the walls. That was the football team of his university, of which he was a huge fan. But more than all these things, there was one thing Jimmy definitely wanted: to impress people. He took his friends on trips to Miami, paid for all the parties himself, and sometimes even gifted them Bitcoins. Jimmy had never done any regular job in his entire life, except once during the summer of 2009, when he worked for a few weeks installing alarm systems. The rest of his life he funded only through one thing: selling Bitcoin. As the price of Bitcoin kept increasing, Jimmy began regretting some of his old decisions. He felt that buying a house in cash had been a mistake because it had cost him over 1,000 Bitcoins at that time. Now, he could have bought the same house for just $3. He even regretted that once he had sold some Bitcoins for only $5 just to buy beer. But those regrets didn't affect him deeply. He still kept partying, and as time passed, Jimmy became even more addicted to pleasure chasing. His posts on the Bitcoin Talk forum also started decreasing gradually. Now, he only appeared there sometimes, either drunk or under the influence of something stronger. Many times he would post from his loaded account, and then reply to that same post from his old Mercedes-Benz account, as if he was talking to himself. Everything was slowly becoming strange. Once someone jokingly wrote that the price of Bitcoin probably fell because Loaded got arrested. Jimmy replied, "If I ever become that sloppy, arrest me and throw away the key." If only that user knew how close he was to the truth. And here we are not talking about the 2016 arrest, when Jimmy was caught red-handed by an off-duty cop in a restaurant in Georgia, called Eddie's Calzones. At that time, Jimmy was dipping a small kitchen spoon into a bag of white powder. And yes, this incident is completely true. Jimmy got only 1 year of probation in that drug case, and sometime later the case was completely expunged. That means his name and record were legally erased, as if that incident had never happened. Now just think, a man who bought a house in cash could easily have raised suspicion from the IRS, Internal Revenue Service. But Jimmy had always honestly paid taxes on the Bitcoins he sold. He had made no rookie mistake, at least not yet. And the biggest thing was, the Bitcoins Jimmy sold were only the ones he had earned legally through mining or trading. The Bitcoins he had hacked from Silk Road, he had still never touched them. 5 years had passed, but Jimmy had kept those stolen coins completely untouched. That in itself was quite shocking. Jimmy had about 500 Bitcoins, and he held them through every bull run and every crash. He watched as one day his holdings became worth millions of dollars, and the next day they fell just as quickly. But Jimmy never panic sold. He stayed calm and kept posting strange things on Bitcoin Talk. Sometimes he would post random pictures, and other times he would just write, "The only way to survive so many market ups and downs is to take drugs." But now, everything was about to change. In 2017, Jimmy was about to make a post from his loaded account that would suddenly make him famous on Bitcoin Talk. But maybe he himself had no idea how much attention he was about to get. By the end of 2016, Bitcoin's popularity had grown rapidly. By the end of the year, Bitcoin's price had reached around $1. But with this rise came a new technical problem. Bitcoin's protocol could process only a limited number of transactions per second. As the number of users increased, transaction speeds slowed down, and fees kept rising. If Bitcoin was to become a real-world currency, it needed to handle thousands of transactions per second at very low fees. By 2017, this technical issue had grown so serious that the entire Bitcoin community had split into two parts. This divide gave birth to a new concept, Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin Cash was a cryptocurrency similar to Bitcoin, but with a larger block size so it could handle more transactions. The special advantage of this new system was that every person who already held Bitcoins would receive an equal number of free Bitcoin Cash coins. That meant Jimmy, who already had 500 Bitcoins, now became the owner of an equal number of Bitcoin Cash coins. In an instant his holdings doubled. However, many people did not trust Bitcoin Cash. The Bitcoin community was divided into two camps. One group believed that the real currency was only Bitcoin, and Bitcoin Cash was just a useless copy. The other group believed that Bitcoin's limitations would cause it to fail, and Bitcoin Cash would become the most practical in the future. Jimmy belonged to the first group. He was a Bitcoin supporter. On March 21, 2017, 5 months before Bitcoin Cash's launch, Jimmy made a post from his loaded account that became his most talked about post ever. In that post he tagged Roger Ver, the same Roger Ver who was called the Bitcoin Jesus, an early Bitcoin adopter and an investor in several major crypto companies. By now Roger was fully promoting Bitcoin Cash. Jimmy openly challenged Roger. "If you trust Bitcoin Cash so much, let's trade 1 for 1. You give your Bitcoins, I'll give you an equal amount of Bitcoin Cash." This was no small proposal. It was a speculative trade worth around $60 million at that time. People on Bitcoin Talk were shocked. Jimmy was seen as a hero because he was openly challenging Bitcoin Cash. In a place like Bitcoin Talk, where most people were hardcore Bitcoin supporters, such a bold move was a huge deal. People started roasting Roger. "If you really believe Bitcoin Cash is superior, accept this deal, or everyone will think you're bluffing." The post went viral so fast that it even reached Reddit. Most people believed Roger would never accept the deal. But to everyone's surprise, Roger agreed to the deal. Yes, though he said it would take him 48 hours to properly set up the trade. 2 days later, Jimmy replied again on the same thread, "No contract yet." And that was his last post. After that, Jimmy never posted anything again from his Loaded account. Roger wrote on the forum for months afterward that he tried to contact Loaded but never received a reply. The deal never happened. Jimmy suddenly disappeared. He also stopped posting from his old Mercedes-Benz account. Now everyone had only one question. Why did Jimmy suddenly go silent? Was he scared after seeing Roger's confidence? Did he suddenly realize that if Bitcoin Cash actually succeeded, that trade could cost him heavily? Or was the real reason behind his disappearance something else? Perhaps someone on Reddit had tracked Jimmy's old Bitcoins and linked them back to Silk Road. Now think, when Jimmy had withdrawn all those coins from Silk Road, he had used a mixer to hide them. But the problem was, hiding such a huge amount was not easy. If no one else was using a mixing service at that large a scale, that massive sum would stand out on the blockchain like a shining beacon. Someone only needed to trace where that big amount was moving, and it wouldn't take long to realize all those coins belonged to the same person. And the most solid evidence, Jimmy himself had given to everyone. That same address with 400 Bitcoins whose signed message he had posted on his Loaded profile. Now that very address proved those coins were his. The same mixer he had used to hide the coins, now it was pointing fingers back at him. The same path he was trying to escape through, now people were following that very trail to reach him. And during this time, the most unfortunate part was that the deal with Roger never happened. Just 2 months later, on August 1, 2017, Bitcoin's hard fork took place, and Bitcoin Cash officially launched. But as many had predicted earlier, Bitcoin Cash didn't perform as spectacularly as real Bitcoin did. Bitcoin started its biggest bull run at that time and shot straight up to. Meanwhile, Bitcoin Cash's price was only around 3. This meant that if Jimmy and Roger's deal had happened, Jimmy would have had about $73 million more than what he had now. 2 or 3 days after that deal, Jimmy transferred all his Bitcoin Cash to a foreign exchange. There he sold them and used that money to buy about 3,500 new Bitcoins. At that time, their value in the peak market was around $68 million. That was a big amount, but nothing compared to the missed billion-dollar chance. Still, now Jimmy had a total of 3,500 Bitcoins, whose value in that market was over $1 billion. So for him, true luxury now meant he could spend freely. And because these 3,500 coins had come to him almost for free, he started spending from them. This marked the beginning of Jimmy's $16 million spending spree. If someone ever tells you that crime never pays, just remember Jimmy's smile. At 28 years old, Jimmy had everything a man could want: money, cars, a house, popularity and excess. But what Jimmy wanted the most was people's acceptance. Because of that, he molded himself into a millionaire showman. Jimmy bought several Lamborghinis, a boat, jet skis, motorcycles and countless luxury items. He spent thousands of dollars renting private yachts, flying private jets, putting his friends up in 5-star hotels, and taking them to parties, nightclubs and sporting events. Jimmy paid for everything himself. Not only that, he started gifting Bitcoins again. This time, he prepared 5 USB drives, each loaded with 50 Bitcoins. Each USB was worth around $1 million at that time. Being Jimmy's friend in that era was nothing short of hitting a jackpot. Now the story was moving toward its most twisted turn, where there was money and fame, but danger was coming closer every day. Once Jimmy withdrew $100,000 cash directly from the bank, just because he wanted a movie-like suitcase full of money. He thought that maybe seeing all that cash would impress a girl and bring her closer to him. Later he admitted that this idea had completely failed. In fact, Jimmy even confessed that he had never been in a relationship, except once, when he paid for it. Jimmy had no shortage of money, but acceptance and love were still far away. Now a new name entered the story: Clayton Kemker. Clayton was a businessman, interested in real estate projects. He met Jimmy. They talked, became friends, and then together started a company. And Jimmy was the one investing money in this project. He initially promised $9.5 million and made a $32 million commitment to help secure a total loan of $60 million. Clayton thought Jimmy was some kind of tech genius who had gotten into the Bitcoin world early and become rich through it. Jimmy was indeed an early adopter, but Clayton had no idea of the full truth. However, Jimmy's flashy lifestyle was once again attracting the wrong kind of attention. That suitcase in which he had kept $100,000 in cash had caught someone's eye. In the last week of March 2019, Jimmy filed a complaint with the police that while he was out of town, his Gainesville house had been robbed. He said that when he returned, he found the back bedroom window broken, and that same suitcase, the one filled with cash. He used to carry thousands of dollars in cash with him. Now he was missing. Jimmy also told the police that the suitcase was already half spent, so there was around a few $1,000s in cash left inside it. Along with that suitcase, there was also a USB drive that contained some of his personal information. Jimmy was certain that whoever stole it must have known him, because he had hidden that suitcase behind an air vent. Lieutenant Shepard later said that neither the cash was found, nor the thief was ever identified. But this report shook up one more big thing. The IRS, reporting a theft of such a large amount of money, immediately raised a red flag in their system. And now, the story brings in a new character, Trevor McLennan. He was an IRS officer who was an expert in cryptocurrency, cybercrime and online money investigations. Officers like Trevor have one job: to uncover the real identities of people hiding behind crypto transactions. They are like FBI agents, except they quietly build cases for years. And when they strike, the case is so tight that escaping becomes impossible. Jimmy had no clue that someone was slowly building a case against him. But even then, the IRS didn't have any solid evidence that Jimmy was the man who had hacked Silk Road. The IRS just wanted to know, where did all this money come from? Was it connected to any illegal source? The IRS didn't fully suspect Jimmy yet, because until then he had cleverly kept his stolen coins separate from his real identity. But still, Jimmy made a mistake that no one expected from him. After that theft incident, Jimmy had started feeling unsafe in his old house, so he bought a new house worth about $10 million, a private property by the lake in Gainesville. For the IRS, this was like a bonus signal. They asked Jimmy's internet provider for his old IP address and browsing history. The IRS found that Jimmy had been using a static IP address that was assigned to him from August 1, 2016 to April 1. Now a static IP address is like a person's online fingerprint. Whenever someone visits a website or uses an online service, their IP gets locked in the record. The IRS checked Jimmy's browsing activity and discovered that he frequently visited a crypto exchange where he was selling his bitcoins and converting them into USD. The IRS then demanded information from that exchange as well, and the exchange handed over Jimmy's entire record. The record contained everything. When Jimmy opened the account in March 2017, what he bought and sold, every transaction's date, amount and type. Now the matter had become serious. The IRS was now seeing everything Jimmy had tried to hide from the world. The most shocking part was that Jimmy had never used a VPN. If he had used a VPN, his real IP address would never have been exposed. Neither his internet provider could have seen which sites he was visiting, nor could any government agency have tracked him so easily. Now what does a VPN do? It encrypts your entire internet traffic, meaning no person or system sitting in between can see your online activity. If Jimmy had shown his location as another country using a VPN, his online behavior would have been masked, and tracing him would have been nearly impossible. But he didn't even care about such basic cybersecurity. Now the IRS had his IP, his entire crypto exchange data, and all of it had been obtained legally. After this, the IRS took the next step. Blockchain tracing began. The IRS has a special love for blockchain because it's a digital system where every transaction record remains forever. Nothing can ever be erased here. Where in normal investigations people can hide evidence, on blockchain everything is transparent, and every transaction tells its full story. The IRS now had Jimmy's wallet addresses. They began opening and analyzing his complete transaction history, one by one. The only challenge was connecting these digital addresses to a real person. But in today's world, that's not a big problem. Now there are advanced software and tracing tools that can scan the blockchain and label every address. For example, all the old addresses connected to Silk Road are already tagged in those systems. That means, if any transaction is linked to one of those addresses, the system immediately flags it. This address is connected to Silk Road, and that's exactly what a Reddit user had already proven back in 2017, that some of Jimmy's bitcoins were directly linked to the Silk Road chain. Now the real question was, did Jimmy ever sell those Silk Road bitcoins on that tracked exchange? If he had, he would have been caught right then. But Jimmy wasn't that careless. He never sold those stolen coins on the same exchange. Yet he made one massive mistake, a mistake that brought him directly under the IRS radar. That's the biggest problem with crime. Even a single slip can bring everything crashing down. On September 9, 2019, just a few months after he had filed the theft report, Jimmy made that big mistake. That day he sold 1,118 bitcoins on the same exchange. Those coins were the ones he had mined himself, completely legal. But Bitcoin has a technical feature that often exposes even the smartest thieves. Think of each Bitcoin address as a piggy bank. When you take money out of it, you have to break the whole piggy. That means, if an address holds 10 coins and you want to spend only 6, the system sends 6 coins to the recipient and returns the remaining 4 coins to a new address called a change address. This new address is automatically created but still belongs to you. When Jimmy sold those 118 bitcoins, a small remaining portion, around 0.77 bitcoin, went into this new change address. That new address was created at that very moment, and IRS investigator Trevor McLennan already knew that this new address belonged to Jim. That tiny mistake connected Jimmy's wallet directly to the exchange. Still, up to this point, the IRS had no solid proof that Jimmy was the man who had stolen coins from Silk Road. They had suspicions, but no direct evidence. But the story didn't end there. On November 24, 2020, Jimmy moved his old Silk Road bitcoins again. He had one large wallet, containing about 10,000 bitcoins. Now he split it into 10 separate wallets, 1,000 bitcoins. He was dividing the stolen treasure into smaller chunks, like a man breaking apart evidence before trying to erase it. By 2020, the IRS still didn't know that Jimmy had any direct link with Silk Road. The investigation so far was only about the bitcoins Jimmy had openly shown. But everything changed because of one old address. On November 24, 2020, Jimmy divided his old 10,000 Bitcoin wallet into 10 parts, each holding 1,000 Bitcoins. He was preparing to invest his remaining money into his real estate project. It looked like he was about to start selling those coins gradually. 3 weeks later, he split one of those wallets into even smaller parts, one with 500 Bitcoins and two with 250. In that transaction, he reused an old address, the same one that was earlier connected to his real identity. For the first time, Jimmy linked his real-life wallet to the coins he had been hiding for years. The mistake he had managed to avoid for 8 years finally came to light. Trevor McLennan traced it. At first he thought he had just found one of Jimmy's big wallets, but as he followed the blockchain record step by step, something bigger began to appear. The deeper he went, the more the coin numbers increased. Finally he reached the address that the IRS had flagged back in 2013 as being linked to Silk Road. Now it wasn't just about hidden money. This had become a massive revelation. It was now 2021, and Bitcoin's price had reached. When Trevor checked the total value of that stash, it was over $3 billion. Now the real question arose: who was Jimmy? Was he a hidden partner of Silk Road? Was he a trusted ally of Ross Ulbricht? Or was he some other face that had remained in the shadows all along? They needed answers, and only Jimmy could provide them. A few months after this tracing, the authorities raided both of his houses. In his lakefront home, they found $700,000 in cash and 25 Casasius coins worth about $7,100. But the most shocking discovery was in the bathroom cabinet, a Cheetos popcorn can. Inside it, there was a small computer hidden, containing all of Jimmy's Bitcoins. Jimmy was arrested. All his belongings were seized, but the coins were still there untouched, locked in an encrypted wallet. To unlock them, only one key was needed, and that key was inside Jimmy's mind. For weeks it seemed like the government would never get those coins. Jimmy stayed silent, but after spending 6 months in jail, he broke down. On March 25, 2020, it was seen that 5 massive transfers were made from Jimmy's wallet, directly to a government-controlled address. Now the real question arose: what exactly was Jimmy being charged for? His lawyer said in court that no one had been harmed. Remember, the creator of Silk Road, Ross Ulbricht, the man who had once personally thanked Jimmy, was now serving a life sentence without any chance of release. Even if Jimmy had wanted to return those Bitcoins to Ross, it would have been illegal. The most interesting part was, the case wasn't even under Jimmy's name. It was under Ross. When Ross was sentenced in 2015, the judge had made it clear that all Bitcoins that ever passed through Silk Road were considered part of that same crime in the eyes of the US government. That meant, even if someone bought such coins later on, the government still had a claim over them. The total Bitcoin seized from Jimmy were 51,680, worth $3.4 billion at that time. And surprisingly, over all those years, Jimmy had spent only 1% of them, and that too, back when Bitcoin's price was much lower. But now he no longer had the full amount. So the government seized every single thing he owned, $27,000 in cash, his legally sold Bitcoins, his properties, and even his share in the real estate company. In court, Jimmy said, "I knew I was doing wrong, but I kept telling myself it was okay. It made me feel important, like I mattered." At that time, Jimmy was 33 years old. The judge sentenced him to 1 year and 1 day in prison. The charge: money laundering. The judge said the entire operation had been executed with extreme cleverness. He said today's victim may be a criminal system, but if this same method were applied to a real business, the damage could be devastating. Jimmy said after his arrest, even his best friends distanced themselves from him. They both got new jobs, and perhaps they never returned because Jimmy was no longer the rich guy he used to be. And the biggest blow for Jimmy now was that he had to pay taxes on the seized Bitcoins, not in thousands, but in millions of dollars every year. He often asked himself one question: when everything is gone and no one is left, what's left in life now? Now Jimmy drives for Uber. He's no longer the mastermind of any big scheme, just another driver waiting for his next ride notification. This case is the second largest Bitcoin seizure in American history. And the first one. That story some other time. If this case shocked you, don't forget to leave a like. What do you think? Tell us in the comments below.